In this video, we will talk about the object equality, which means how do we check if two objects are equal or not. We can use double equals operator to compare two objects, which is basically this. So we can use this operator to compare two objects to know if those two objects are equal or not. The thing with double equals is that when we use it with objects, it basically checks the memory location of those objects. All right. It considers each object unique in terms of their memory location. So when we are comparing two objects, it will check their corresponding memory locations. And if the memory locations are same, then only it considers both objects equal. So let's see what do we mean by that. Consider an example where we have an employee class and it has two attributes ID and name, and we are initializing an employee object E1. So we say employee E1 equals to new employee, and the ID of the employee is 1 and name is, let's say, E1. This is the employee number 1. Similarly, we are creating another employee E2, new employee ID is 2, or let's say the ID is 1 again and the name is also same E1. So we created two employee objects E1 and E2 with same ID and same name. Now if we check E1 double equals E2, then what do you think it will return? Because the ID is same and the name is also same for both the employee objects. So we may think that if we are using E1 double equals E2, it will return true because these two employees are basically same, but it is not the case. If we run a code with E1 double equals E2, then it will return a value false. The reason is that even though values are equal, these two objects are not equal. They're not the same. They are different when we consider their memory locations. So what happens when we initialize a new object E1? Consider this is the heap where all the objects go. So what JVM did, it created a new object on the heap, and E1 is referring to this object. All right. Then we created another object E2 with the same values, but for JVM it is a new object. So it will create another object on the heap, and E2 is referring to this object. And when we are saying E1 double equals E2, what JVM will do, JVM will check the memory location of E1 and E2, which is different because they are two distinct objects on the heap. So their memory location on the heap is not same. That's why JVM will see, okay, these two are distinct objects, they are not same, and hence we will get the output false. So this is the default behavior of double equals or equality when we consider comparing the objects. But we can say that, okay, the ID is same and the name is same, so they are logically same. So that is called the logical equality when we want to check two objects based on certain attributes, that if these attributes of these two objects are same, then we will consider them equal. To perform the logical equality, we can use equals method. Equals method is a method that belongs to the object class, and that is why it is there in all the classes. Whatever classes we create, they all override the equals method from the object class. The only thing is the default behavior of equals method is double equals, which compares the memory locations. It does not perform the logical equality. But if we want to implement the logical equality based on certain attributes, then we can override the equals method and we can decide, okay, I will consider these attributes, these properties for my equals method. So I can say, considering the employee class, I can say that I will only consider the name. If the name of two employee objects, if the name is same, then I will consider them as same object. So that is my criteria. And depending on the class, depending on the situation, the criteria will change, and so the implementation of equals. But for a particular class, the equals implementation will and should remain the same. All right. Overriding equals. Now equals method in the object class, it has a contract. It documents a contract that if you are overriding your own equals method, then your implementation must satisfy certain conditions, and these conditions are called the equals contract. In equals contract, there are 5 conditions and we will go through them one by one. Number 1 is that the implementation should be reflexive, which means if we have an object x, then x dot equals x must return true. It means we should be able to compare the object with itself. That is the condition number 1, that the implementation must be reflexive. Condition number 2 is that the implementation should be symmetric. What it means is if x dot equals y, it returns true, then y dot equals x, it must also return true. So x and y and x, it must be symmetric. Condition number 3 is that the implementation must be transitive. It means if x dot equals y, if x is equal to y and y is equal to z, then x dot equals z must return true. So this is the transitive relation between 3 different objects using the equals method. Condition number 4 says that the implementation must be consistent. It means no matter how many times we are doing the comparison, for a certain comparison, it must always return the same value. So if x dot equals is y, then for any number of times, it must always return true for x dot equals y. All right. And the last condition is for null values, it must always return false. So if we are comparing an object reference with null, then it must always return false. So if we are saying something like this, x equals null, then it will always return false. So these are the conditions that belong to the equals constraint. If we are writing our own implementation of equals, then we need to make sure that the implementation follows these conditions. Now let's see a quick demo on the equals. So consider we have this class employee, and this has 2 properties, int id and string name, and we have a constructor to initialize the employee object. And we create a new employee e1 equals to new employee name e1. Similarly, we create another employee with the same name and same ID. Now if we do e1 dot equals e2, then as expected it will return false because they are 2 distinct objects and their memory location is different. So the output will be false. All right. But if I say employee e1 alias equals to e1, so what I'm saying is I'm creating another reference variable that is pointing to the same object. This time if I do e1 dot equals e1 alias, then the first condition would return true. Why? Because these are 2 reference variables pointing to the same object. There is only a single object, and so the memory location is same for e1 and e1 alias, and that's why e1 double equals e1 alias returns true. So we get the idea that it checks the memory location. Now What we need to do, we need to check if the ID and the name is same for two different objects, then we want them to consider same, we want them to consider as equal objects. To do that, we know that we have to override the equals method in the class. What we can do, we have two choices. Either we create or write the equals implementation on our own, or with the help of IDE, we can generate the equals method. So IDE can generate the equals for us. Let's do that. Equals, and it is basically asking us to provide a template, and it follows certain templates, for example Apache Commons, Lang3, but what we are saying, we want to follow the Java template. Then it is asking what properties do you want to consider in your equals method. So I'm saying I want to consider ID and name both, and select all non-null fields, that name would be non-null. We can ignore hash code for now, but see the implementation for equals. It basically checks if the object that you are passing, if this is the same object, then return true. It means if this is, for example, an alias, in that case double equals will return true because they are pointing to the same object. Then it is checking if the passed object is null or their classes are different, then we need to return false. There is no need to basically check the objects because they don't belong to the same class hierarchy. Otherwise, cast the object to the employee type and check the ID. If the ID is same, then check the name, and if ID and name both are same, then return true, otherwise it will return false. So this time, after implementing the equals method, if I now test the equality between E1 and E2 using equals method, then I should see true. Yes, because now we are testing the logical equality using equals method. So what it is doing, it is testing E1 and E2 based on this criteria using the equals method. All right.